Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about mushrooms, and I'm very excited about the information I found on the internet. Some of you may already be familiar with it, but I want to put sort of a twist to it to connect it to what I've received from my Inner Planes mentor, Thoth Ra, in the past, that now I see the connection blossoming into making even more sense to me for the present and the future. As I said, this is information on a very special hybrid mushroom that an individual has created. And it's not just about that, but about mushrooms in general and how incredible they are, and that their DNA is so similar to ours, actually. It's very closely related, possibly the closest on the planet. I'm not sure about that, but as we look at the video, I can refresh my memory on it, and you will see the truth of that. I have the video of the TED Talk that this individual did, but rather than place it separately, I am incorporating it into my discourse here so that it's more seamless. We can look at the video together, and I want to read a little bit from his site and then go into my Thoth information. But I will post or put a link to the video separately so you can have that video separately as well. So that said, let's begin by looking at the video. Actually, before we look at the video, I'd like to read you from the page where the video was attached. In 2006, a patent was granted to a man named Paul Stamets. Through Paul, though Paul is the world's leading mycologist, his patent has received very little attention and exposure. Why is that? Stated by executives in the pesticide industry, this patent of Paul's represents the most disruptive technology we have ever witnessed. And when the executives say disruptive, they are referring to it being disruptive to the chemical pesticides industry. What has Paul discovered? The mycologist has figured out how to use Mother Nature's own creations to keep insects from destroying crops. It's what is being called smart pesticides. These pesticides provide safe and nearly permanent solution for controlling over 200,000 species of insects, and all thanks to the magic of mushrooms. Paul does this by taking, okay, this is a really big word for Maya, so let me go slowly, entomopathogenic fungi that destroys insects, and morphs it so it does not produce spores. In turn, this actually attracts the insects, who then eat and turn it into fungi from the inside out. Now, when he says inside out, this is what he means. This is an ant who has died from eating the fungi, and he's turning into fungi, which will turn into plants. This patent has potential to revolutionize the way humans grow crops. It can be allowed to reach mass exposure. To tolerate the use of pesticides in modern agriculture is to deny evidence proving its detrimental effects against the environment. Such ignorance can no longer be tolerated. Apologies, that was a short interruption. To continue, Monsanto's chemical concoctions, which are being sprayed all over farmers' fields around the world, are attributed to the large-scale bee die-off. While a growing number of countries are banning Monsanto, it's still being used in nations who should be aware of its dangers. To say that new methods need to be implemented before it is too late is an understatement. Monsanto presently generates $16 billion per year, as reported in 2014. Therefore, you can be certain they do not want anything interrupting that flow of revenue. Such income gives them nearly limitless resources and abilities to suppress information that may be damaging their reputation. And here we have our little ant again. But by becoming educated on the benefits of growing sustainable, organic, and biodynamic food, sharing articles like this, and boycotting GMO and herbicide-sprayed crops, the corporate demon may soon get the message. And then it gives some links here, which I will be providing to this page or whatever, so you can get it all that you need right here. But we're going to go look at the video right now. And so let's just watch it together. It's not very long. It's about 18 minutes, and it's worth every second.
I love a challenge, and saving the Earth is probably a good one. We all know the Earth is in trouble. We have now entered into 6X, the sixth major extinction on this planet. I often wondered if there was a united organization of organisms, otherwise known as uh-oh, and every organism had a right to vote. Will we be voted on the planet or off the planet? I think that vote is occurring right now. I want to present to you a suite of 6 mycological solutions using fungi, and these solutions are based on mycelium. The mycelium infuses all landscapes. It holds soils together. It's extremely tenacious. It holds up to 30,000 times its mass. They're the grand molecular disassemblers of nature, the soil magicians. They generate the humus soils across the land masses of Earth. We have now discovered that there is a multi-directional transfer of nutrients between plants mitigated by the mycelium. So the mycelium is the mother that is giving nutrients from alder and birch trees to hemlock, cedars, and Douglas firs. Dusty and I, we like to say on Sunday, this is where we go to church. I'm in love with the old growth forest, and I'm a patriotic American because we have those. Most of you are familiar with portobello mushrooms, and frankly, I face a big obstacle when I mention mushrooms to somebody. They immediately think portobellos or magic mushrooms, their eyes glaze over, and they think I'm a little crazy. So I hope to pierce that prejudice forever with this group. We call it mycophobia, the irrational fear of the unknown when it comes to fungi. Mushrooms are very fast in their growth, day 21, day 23, day 25. Mushrooms produce strong antibiotics. In fact, we're more closely related to fungi than we are to any other kingdom. A group of 20 eukaryotic microbiologists published a paper 2 years ago erecting Opisthokonta, a super kingdom that joins Animalia and fungi together. We share in common the same pathogens. Fungi don't like to rot from bacteria, and so our best antibiotics come from fungi. But here is a mushroom that's past its prime. After they sporulate, they do rot. But I propose to you that the sequence of microbes that occur on rotting mushrooms are essential for the health of the forests that give rise to the trees that create the debris fields that feed the mycelium. And so we see a mushroom here sporulating, and spores are germinating, and the mycelium forms and goes underground. In a single cubic inch of soil, there can be more than 8 miles of these cells. My foot is covering approximately 300 miles of mycelium. This is photomicrographs from Nick Reed and Patrick Hickey. And notice that as the mycelium grows, it conquers territory, and then it begins to net. I've been a scanning electron microscopist for many years. I have thousands of electron micrographs. And when I was staring at the mycelium, I realized that there are microfiltration membranes. We exhale carbon dioxide, so does mycelium. It inhales oxygen, just like we do. But these are essentially externalized stomachs and lungs. And I present to you the concept that these are extended neurological membranes. And in these cavities, these microcavities form, and as they fuse soils, they absorb water. These are little wells. And inside these wells, the microbial communities begin to form. And so the spongy soil not only resists erosion, but sets up a microbial universe that gives rise to a plurality of other organisms. I first proposed in the early 1990s that mycelium is Earth's natural internet. When you look at the mycelium, they're highly branched. And if there's one branch that is broken, then very quickly, because of the nodes of crossing, internet engineers maybe call them hop points, there's alternative pathways for channeling nutrients and information. The mycelium is sentient. It knows that you are there. When you walk across landscapes, it leaps up in the aftermath of your footsteps, trying to grab debris. So I believe the invention of the computer internet is an inevitable consequence of a previously proven biologically successful model. The Earth invented the computer internet for its own benefit, and we now, being the top organism on this planet, is trying to allocate resources in order to protect the biosphere. Going way out, dark matter conforms to the same mycelial archetype. I believe matter begets life. Life becomes single cells become strings, strings become chains, chains network. And this is the paradigm that we see throughout the universe. Most of you may not know that fungi were the first organisms to come to land. They came to land 1.3 billion years ago, and plants followed several hundred million years later. How is that possible? It's possible because the mycelium produces oxalic acids and many other acids and enzymes, pockmarking rock and grabbing calcium and other minerals and forming calcium oxalates, makes the rocks crumble, and the first step in the generation of soil. Oxalic acid is two carbon dioxide molecules joined together. So fungi and mycelium sequester carbon dioxide in the form of calcium oxalates, and all sorts of other oxalates are also sequestering carbon dioxide through the minerals that are being formed and taken out of the rock matrix. This was first discovered in 1859. There's a photograph by Franz Huber. This photograph was taken in the 1950s from Saudi Arabia. 420 million years ago, this organism existed. It was called Prototaxides. Prototaxides, laying down, was about 3 feet tall. The tallest plants on Earth at that time were less than 2 feet. Dr. Boyce at the University of Chicago published an article in the Journal of Geology this past year determining that Prototaxides was a giant fungus, a giant mushroom. Across the landscapes of Earth were dotted these giant mushrooms all across most land masses, and these existed for tens of millions of years. Now, we've had several extinction events, and as we march forward 65 million years ago, most of you know about it, we had an asteroid impact. The Earth was struck by an asteroid, a huge amount of debris was jettisoned into the atmosphere, sunlight was cut off, and fungi inherited the Earth. Those organisms that paired with fungi were rewarded because fungi do not need light. More recently, at Einstein University, they just determined that fungi use radiation as a source of energy, much like plants use light. So the prospect of fungi existing on other planets elsewhere, I think, is a foregone conclusion, at least in my own mind. The largest organism in the world is in eastern Oregon. I couldn't miss it. It was 2,200 acres in size. 2,200 acres in size, 2,000 years old. The largest organism on the planet is a mycelial mat, 1 cell wall thick. How is it that this organism can be so large and yet be 1 cell wall thick, whereas we have 5 or 6 skin layers that protect us? The mycelium, under right conditions, produces a mushroom. It bursts through with such ferocity it can break asphalt. We were involved in several experiments. I'm going to show you 6, if I can, solutions for helping to save the world. Battelle Laboratories and I joined up in Bellingham, Washington. There were 4 piles saturated with diesel and other petroleum waste. One was a control pile. One pile was treated with enzymes. One pile was treated with bacteria. And our pile we inoculated with mushroom mycelium. The mycelium absorbs the oil. The mycelium is producing enzymes, peroxidases, that break carbon-hydrogen bonds. These are the same bonds that hold hydrocarbons together. So the mycelium becomes saturated with the oil, and then when we returned 6 weeks later, all the tarps were removed, all the other piles were dead, dark, and stinky. We came back to our pile, it was covered with hundreds of pounds of oyster mushrooms, and the color changed to a light form. The enzymes remanufactured the hydrocarbons into carbohydrates, fungal sugars. Some of these mushrooms are very happy mushrooms. They're very large. They're showing how much nutrition that they could have obtained. But something else happened, which was an epiphany in my life. They sporulated, the spores attract insects, the insects laid eggs, eggs became larvae, birds then came bringing in seeds, and our pile became an oasis of life. Whereas the other 3 piles were dead, dark, and stinky, and the PAHs, the aromatic hydrocarbons, went from 10,000 parts per million to less than 200 in 8 weeks. The last image we don't have, the entire pile was a green berm of life. These are gateway species, vanguard species that open the door for other biological communities. So I invented burlap sacks, bunker spawn. And putting the mycelium, using storm-blown debris, you can take these burlap sacks and put them downstream from a farm that's producing E. coli or other waste, or a factory with chemical toxins, and it leads to habitat restoration. So we set up a site in Mason County, Washington, and we've seen a dramatic decrease in the amount of coliforms. And I'll show you a graph here. This is a logarithmic scale, 10 to the 8th power. There's more than 100 million colonies per gram, and 10 to the 3rd power is around 1,000. In 48 hours to 72 hours, these three mushroom species reduce the amount of coliform bacteria 10,000 times. Think of the implications. This is a space-conservative method that uses storm debris, and we can be guaranteed that we'll have storms every year. So this one mushroom in particular has drawn our interest over time. This is my wife, Dusty, with a mushroom called Fomitopsis officinalis, agarikon. It's a mushroom exclusive to the old-growth forest. The Dioscorides first described in 65 AD as a treatment against consumption. This mushroom grows in Washington State, Oregon, Northern California, British Columbia, now thought to be extinct in Europe. It may not seem that large. Let's get closer. This is an extremely rare fungus. Our team, and we have a team of experts that go out, we went out 20 times in the old-growth forest last year. We found one sample to be able to get into culture. Preserving the genome of these fungi in the old-growth forest, I think, is absolutely critical for human health. I've been involved with the U.S. Defense Department BioShield program. We submitted over 300 samples of mushrooms that we boiled in hot water and mycelium, harvesting these extracellular metabolites. And a few years ago, we received these results. We have 3 different strains of agarikon mushrooms that were highly active against pox viruses. Dr. Earl Kern, who's a smallpox expert of the U.S. Defense Department, states that any compounds that have a selectivity index of 2 or more are active, 10 or greater are considered to be very active. Our mushroom strains were in the highly active range. There's a vetted press release that you can read that's vetted by DOD if you Google Stamets and smallpox, or you can go to npr.org and listen to a live interview. So encouraged by this, naturally, we went to flu viruses. And so for the first time, I'm showing this. We have 3 different strains of agarikon mushrooms, highly active against flu viruses. Here's the selectivity index numbers. Against pox, you saw 10s and 20s. Now, against flu viruses, compared to the ribavirin controls, we are having extraordinarily high activity. And we're using a natural extract within the same dosage window as a pure pharmaceutical. We tried against flu A viruses, H1N1, H3N2, as well as flu B viruses. So then we tried a blend, and in a blend combination, we tried it against H5N1, and we got greater than 1,000 selectivity index. I then think that we can make the argument that we should save the old-growth forest as a matter of national defense. I became interested in entomopathogenic fungi, fungi that kill insects. Our house is being destroyed by carpenter ants. So I went to the EPA homepage, and they were recommending studies with Metarhizium species, a group of fungi that kill carpenter ants, as well as termites. I did something that nobody else had done. I actually chased the mycelium when it stopped producing spores. These are spores. This is no spores. I was able to morph the culture into a non-sporulating form. And so the industry has spent over $100 million specifically on bait stations to prevent termites from eating your house. But the insects aren't stupid. They would avoid the spores when they came close. And so I morphed the cultures into a non-sporulating form. And I got my daughter's Barbie doll dish. I put it right with a bunch of carpenter ants who are making debris fields every day in my house. And the ants were attracted to the mycelium because there's no spores. They gave it to the queen. 1 week later, I had no sawdust piles whatsoever. And then a delicate dance between dinner and death. The mycelium is consumed by the ants. They become mummified, and boing, a mushroom pops out of their head. Now, after sporulation, the spores repel, so the house is no longer suitable for invasion. So you have a near-permanent solution for reinvasion of termites. And so my house came down. I received my first patent against carpenter ants, termites, and fire ants. Then we tried extracts, and lo and behold, we can steer insects to different directions. This has huge implications. I then received my second patent, and this is a big one. It's been called an Alexander Graham Bell patent because it covers over 200,000 species. This is the most disruptive technology, I've been told by executives of the pesticide industry, that they have ever witnessed. This could totally revamp the pesticide industries throughout the world. You could fly 100 PhD students under the umbrella of this concept, because my supposition is that entomopathogenic fungi, prior to sporulation, attract the very insects that are otherwise repelled by those spores. And so I came up with a life box, because I needed a delivery system. The life box, you could be getting a DVD of the TED conference. You had soil, you had water, you have mycorrhizal and endophytic fungi, as well as spores like of the agarikon mushroom. The seeds then are mothered by this mycelium, and then you put tree seeds in here, and then you end up growing potentially an old-growth forest from a cardboard box. I want to reinvent the delivery system and the use of cardboard around the world so they become ecological footprints. If there's a YouTube-like site that you could put up, you can make it interactive, zip code specific, where people could join together, and through satellite imaging systems, through virtual Earth or Google Earth, you could confirm carbon credits are being sequestered by the trees that are coming through life boxes. You could take a cardboard box delivering shoes, you could add water. I developed this for DARPA, for the refugee community, corns, beans, and squash and onions. I took several containers. My wife said if I could do this, anybody could. And I ended up growing a seed garden. You harvested the seeds. And thank you, Eric Rasmussen, for your help on this. And then harvesting the seed garden, then you can harvest the kernels. And then I just need a few kernels. I add mycelium to it. And then I inoculate the corn cobs. Now, 3 corn cobs, no other grain, lots of mushrooms begin to form, too many withdrawals from the carbon bank. And so this population will be shut down. But watch what happens here. The mushrooms that are harvested, but very importantly, the mycelium is converted to cellulose and to fungal sugars. And so I thought, how could we address the energy crisis in this country? And we came up with ethanol. Generating ethanol from cellulose using mycelium as an intermediary, and you gain all the benefits that I've described to you already. But to go from cellulose to ethanol is ecologically unintelligent, and I think that we need to be ecologically intelligent about the generation of fuels, so we build the carbon banks on the planet, renew the soils. These are the species that we need to join with. I think engaging mycelium can help save the world. Thank you very much.
Here is Fungi Perfect, which is this fellow's website, and there's all kinds of neat things on here. Yes, he's selling things, but he needs to be. This should get out there. And there's seminars and all kinds of good stuff, you know, things to eat, things to know, things to learn on this website. I'll have all these links provided with the video I'm making here. And now I'd like to share with you a little bit from a video I made a few years ago for my Kira Portal subscribers called Truth of Trees. And it's basically one in a series of Free of Thoth videos specifically that he's sharing information on, my Inner Planes mentor. So this is just, it's sort of cut off at the top a little bit, but we're going to see just a few moments of it here and there. I, Thoth, came into the forest of Anthu, deep in the heart of the main island of Atlantis for a time. So that information shows you that what Thoth is speaking about, the video is on the truth of trees. Of course, all plants are linked, including the fungus and the everything. But he's showing how human beings at first came into the lotus level of Earth. We have many levels to Earth, and that was really the only one at the time. That was a consensual reality where these souls gathered at this point in space, and they created that realm. And when they chose to enter some kind of physical form, it began as these jellyfish plant-like forms with tentacles into the earth, and eventually they sort of floated around and just touched into the earth with their tentacles. And finally they lost their tentacles, and so on until they became more human-like forms. But there was also the sea aspect of them, this floating aspect like a jellyfish, and they divided finally into human and cetacean, dolphin-like beings. So if we follow the path of all of this, and we see that mushrooms are the fungi that really creates all of the life, it seeds all of this. This juncture is where I wanted to go to Thoth now and ask him about this connection of the human form with fungi, thus mushrooms, and see what he had to say about it. And so now he is showing me how in the lotus reality, that was the beginning, the fungi. And out of that, the trees that developed, the plants, everything were more of a fungal nature. They became more like we understand them now at a later stage. But that's how they began. But as he's shown me before, plants and animals didn't come second to what we call humans, to the soul entering a living form. That came first in the lotus reality, in the lotus level of Earth. Human beings, souls, entered into forms that later became human beings, dolphins. But the forms, these jellyfish-like, plant-like forms, came first. And they literally created a certain nutrient energy that was the soil. The soil isn't like we see it today. The lotus soil was just a sort of a light cloud of high, rich, vaporous nutrients. And eventually it became, as he's saying to me now, fungi, like a fungi mat. And out of that type of fungi, different from what we have now, of course, a more highly less diluted form, so these nutrients were taken into this bubble that was going to be a form for a human being, a human dolphin being, and it created then more of a real form, a real presence. And that presence resembled a human far more than it did a dolphin or any kind of a cetacean. That when we say that they're connected to cetaceans, they didn't look like that then. We have a completely different looking species here that was really more human looking, but still not human. Out of that came the two different branches, the human and the cetacean. But at the time of the lotus, especially the first stages of the time of the lotus, because that was a long period, it was more like a mushroom. It was more like a jellyfish mushroom, let's put it that way, because it had, and I'm going to just move over here to my little Second Life mushroom, if I can get over here to it, which isn't easy with the screen on like this. It had a top something like this, which you could also see it was a little more rounded, like a jellyfish. And then it had a stem, which was more really kind of tentacles coming down directly, not all hanging on the sides, but straight down like a stem, and it rooted in the earth, or the plasma-like condition that would become an earth or a soil form. And so bottom line is that we are fungi. That is, we have those nutrients still in our bodies. And Thoth is also showing me now that the original mushroom-like stages in the lotus reality, or at least some of them, some of the later stages of it, which we don't have on Earth today, not in those stages, can be brought back to nourish the Earth, to nourish human beings and plants and animals in a way beyond what even is taking place now with the mushrooms. So what Paul Stamets is doing by creating a special species of mushroom like he did for the one to control insects, he had to take the spore generating aspect out of it to create that. Well, this can be done in other ways to create these hybrid species of mushrooms and fungi in general that are going back to source. They're going back to the original forms. And they will become more mutable with the human form and animals that came out of that for health, for viability, and for allowing our bodies to move further and more expediently and seamlessly into the pure gem form. So let's take a look at the pure gem form for a moment. Most of you looking at this video are probably aware of that, my material on the pure gem, but I'm going to go over it just briefly because I feel it's very important, the connection to this. I have a lot written about the pure gem body throughout my material, but when I go to find some of it, it becomes more difficult. But here we have saying, Thoth speaks of the pure gem as all the energy bodies, including the physical, becoming a pulsing gem-like quality once ascended into the new Earth star. This pure gem state isn't something that is simply non-existent one minute, then we ascend and it is there. It will still be a matter of receiving it in stages, but in the new Earth star, the stages will not require eons of time, as time is quite different in the new Earth star. Even now, in this current world experience, we have the opportunity to begin to become pure gem beings, even if on micro levels of the total transformation. These micro levels are vital phases of the whole process. And so the pure gem bodies then are something that we're already working on. We're already becoming in many ways. And they're very similar in some ways to the lotus levels of the human form. Not so much the original jellyfish envelopes, the later 2 arms, 2 legs, more human-like looking, but yet having a quality of iridescent, pulsing splendor and beauty about them. So here we are, ready to bring the fungi back to us in higher, less diluted potential. Now, I don't really know how this is going to unfold, and I'm not receiving any terrific epiphanies right now from Thoth or anywhere on how it's going to happen. That may be a future discourse. I will. But for now, I can say that I really, really feel strongly that the fungi of the planet is the key, the absolute key to bringing the whole world back into its form. It's like an explosion in the DNA that can simply retrofit us with what we need from the lotus reality to become our future selves in the new Earth star experience within the pure gem body. Well, so how can we incorporate this new information, both current on the planet and from the Thothic record, into our lives right now? Well, I, for one, am going to start eating more mushrooms. But seriously, not regular mushrooms. I do have a breakfast drink, that has special mushrooms in it. But I see on Sam, is his name Sam? Oh gosh, I'm so terrible. Paul's site, he has this page of host defense mushroom capsules. So I'm going to look into that. I might start taking some of them. I'm assuming that these are things that he's developed. I want to see if that's the case before I invest in it. So I'm not suggesting you run out and buy any of these yet, but, you know, do your own research on it and see. If it's something that he's actually working with, I'm really quite convinced that anything he's working with is genuine and should be, you know, focused upon for health, for the planet, and for ourselves. I'm getting a star of approval from Thoth on this individual, and not that he can't, you know, he's still learning himself and can't make mistakes, but I feel he's genuine in what he's doing. I want to follow closely, and so I'm going to be following this closely and researching it and seeing if it's something that I need to take for myself personally. So I will be putting all these links together with the video, and you can scope all this out yourself and see what you feel like about it. I encourage anyone who has the capability to do gardening, you know, serious gardening, maybe helping to develop some of these packets that he's putting out, whatever, do so. Here on the island of Kauai, and indeed all of the Hawaiian Islands, but Kauai especially, you know, it's GMO City because this is where they originally developed the GMO seeds, or at least maybe not developed them, but, you know, planted them, and the seed pile was here. And some of the other islands are already outlawing GMOs. That has not yet happened on Kauai, not for our want of trying. Believe me, the Kauaians have tried greatly to get rid of GMOs here. I say Kauaians, many of us, but there are also many families here that basically feel they would starve to death if they couldn't do GMO farming anymore. So it's a difficult situation, granted, but it's got to go. GMOs on this island have to go. So anyone who feels that way about wherever they are, let's think about how we can help Paul to accomplish that. It doesn't even take a lot of money. It takes a lot of people. You know, it's another grassroots movement. And I, for one, certainly want to be a part of it. So thank you so much for listening to this, and aloha.